Hi, I'm Dr. Erin Keating, and this is my channel where I share elements of my research and teaching on popular culture related subjects, sometimes alone, sometimes with students. Today, I want to talk a little bit about celebrity in Anglo American culture and its roots. So many of you will be familiar with Chappell Roan's sort of call out earlier this summer of creepy and possessive fan behavior and sort of stalkerish fan behavior, and the conversations that arose around that, so sort of some criticisms, also of course people supporting her in her sort of frustration over her interactions with fans. And so there's some links to her original videos below. I'm not going to sort of rehash them here, but when I was reading about and thinking about this issue, I came across a Swiftologist video take, and I think they provided sort of a nuanced and interesting discussion of this topic. They take a very different approach from me in that they're interested in a more psychological reading of the situation with like a current and sort of limited or sort of focused historical lens. But I recommend you check out their video if you're interested in that sort of thing. So I'm more interested in a structural approach to fandoms and fan culture, and as you'll shortly see, a much wider historical lens. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But in that video, Swiftologist references a Taylor Swift song, Clairbow, that shows sort of this series of female celebrities through the 20th and 21st centuries to show how nothing has really changed. And I bring that up because that is sort of the, the prompt that got me thinking and wanting to do this video was thinking about how the sort of Swift and Swiftologists talking about Swift were saying, this has been happening for the whole 20th, 21st century. Um, I want to bring that time span back to the 17th century in England to actually really demonstrate how deep set and intimately connected sort of with capitalist culture, as we'll get to in a moment, our views of fandom really are in North American culture. So I'm going to start with some celebrity definitions. Current scholars working in celebrity studies disagree on when modern celebrity began. Not that I'm really interested in that. It's a debate for another audience, another time, other people. Beginnings are not of interest to me. Um, but one of the things that all of these scholars sort of agree on when they're talking about definitions of celebrity, and in particular modern celebrity, they agree on the importance of mediation for modern celebrity. So a developed enough sort of media that there's widespread dissemination and consumption of the celebrity image. And while media changes have been steadily increasing, sort of in geographical reach, of course, and to our current moment, we're sort of almost global celebrity cultures, thanks to the internet and whatnot, the core of fan or and the celebrity relationship has not actually changed that fundamentally. Um, and so I want us to look at this sort of 17th century text so that we can see sort of how that's working and how ingrained these ideas are in our culture. But I'm going to start with a definition first. So Greg Jenner, in his work Dead Famous, has a really useful definition of a celebrity, so as a noun. Um, and what he says in that text sort of is the following: a unique persona made widely known to the public via media coverage, whose life is publicly consumed as dramatic entertainment, and whose commercial brand is profitable for those who exploit their popularity, and perhaps also for themselves. So notice in this definition the sort of the emphasis on, widely known media coverage, sort of consumption, publicly consumed, and the idea that this is for profit, right? Not always for the actual celebrity, but it can be as well, and certainly for the industry people around them. And one of the things I want to add to this is that it's not just the celebrities' public performances that are being consumed in this picture of modern celebrity, it's also their personal life. And so Rebecca Tierney-Hynes, who writes about this in terms of early 18th century celebrity, talks about the celebrity sort of being seen as, quote, common property. And so that idea that, and I think that's still really relevant and prevalent today, this idea that a celebrity by nature should be available to the public, and sort of they're in all of their lives, right? Not just their performances, not just the things they actually create intentionally for audiences. So this brings me to the main thing I want to look at in this video, which is a novel called The Player's Tragedy. And this is a novel, or like a secret history, and what I'm calling a fan text, right? So not fan fiction, but it's a secret history about fandom and celebrity focused on the London theater scene in the 1690s. And so that term secret history quickly is just sort of a type of writing, also called sort of a roman à clef, where although it seems as pretending to be fiction, there's made up names, all of these things, there's actual people behind the story. So I want to start with a brief summary of the novel, because it's not a well-known text, and I'm going to link below a sort of typescript sort of version of it, but also if your library has access to early English books online, you can see a reproduction of the original text there. And this is a quite convoluted plot. It includes sort of a point of view character, Montano's description of his courtship of a female celebrity actor named Priscilla. Priscilla in the story refuses his advances, which results in a bod, who's sort of like a pimp, but a woman in this case, which is often the case in 17th century fiction, offering to intercede on his behalf with Priscilla, of course, for the right amount of money. And so Coramella the Bod, she outlines conditions for the sexual encounter, one of which is that it must take place in total darkness. So this goes on for a little while, and Montano enjoys his seeming sexual relationship with Priscilla for a while, but he eventually discovers that he's actually been completely fooled. He's been having an affair with an entirely different woman who's been given her own backstory in a sort of lengthy female narrated, like interpolated tale. So it's a tale within the tale. And after this, Montano is upset, attempts to abduct Priscilla, and failing that, when he runs into sort of her co-star actor on the street named Manfredo, who he actually blames for her refusing, his courtship, he kills Manfredo, and realizing what he's done, immediately flees the country. So that's the text, right? And this is a pretty wild story. There's a lot of honestly very toxic masculinity in it. There's sexual violence. But I think it's a really important story for understanding how long this view of fan culture has persisted, and how long, particularly when we're talking about female celebrities, how long this has persisted. Because this text is not fiction, or not purely fiction. There's elements of fiction, certainly. It's a secret history, right? So it's about an actual actress from the late 17th century, her attempted abduction, and that abduction, or sorry, attempted abduction, and then sort of the death that occurred at the end, they're true events. They did actually happen. And if you're interested in sort of reading more about that, there's a source below, Diana Solomon, who's written quite a bit actually about uh, Bracegirdle, who is the one at the center of this text. So as I just mentioned, the actress at the center of this story is Bracegirdle, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about her just to sort of get a sense of the type of celebrity that is being targeted in this text. And so Bracegirdle was a very important figure on the late Restoration, early 18th century stage in comic roles, in innocent victims, in tragedy. um, she sort of played a number of things. She had sort of witty prologues and epilogues that she also did. And so she was most known, though, for those innocent victims in tragedy. And I'll get back to that in a moment to sort of explain why. But she was also one of a small group of women who actually became the first female sharers, at least in England, in their theater company in the 1690s. And this was when a group of actors actually formed their own breakaway theater company. And so at this time, you had to be licensed officially to perform on the public stage in England. And in London, right, to have a public theater. And so because of things that were going on in the theater, A number of stars at this moment actually decided they were leaving, sort of broke from management, and got permission because of their stature in society to form their own company. Um, and so that sort of shows the power of the theater celebrities at this time, right? They were able to sort of demand this from government figures and get it. And Bracegirdle, in a number of prologues and epilogues, is sort of her stature in particular is hinted at as the reason they were able to get this. I mean, that wasn't likely true, but these sort of the stories that circulated around this moment in time. And so that power is what I'm trying to sort of emphasize here. It was unusual for a woman sort of coming from the middling sorts of society, which is where she came from, to hold the type of celebrity, social and economic power that Bracegirdle had. And so she was a very interesting figure, both for us, but also for the people at the time. And one of the things they were particularly interested in was her sexuality. And this was quite common. And as I mean, we see it today still. This is not something that's changed, right? This idea that a celebrity's sexuality is somehow of particular interest to their fans, and somehow they owe that to their fans, right? In terms of their relationships and whatnot. And so at the time, usually actresses would be either married or potentially would be very sort of sexually um, active women, right? And there are a number of other sort of celebrity figures who used this in relation to the roles they played on stage in really interesting ways, and built their names and provided them with a certain amount of sexual freedom. They were always criticized, but they had a freedom to sort of behave in ways that weren't considered in line with the dominant morality of the time. Bracegirdle is a little different. So people were obsessed with her sexual activities, certainly, but it's because she had this reputation as the virgin actress. And as far as we know, this may have been true, right? She never married. Um, and while there was lots of speculation and rumors and gossip in sort of the satires of the time, and then sort of the texts that have survived in relation to her as a person and as an actor, um, we don't know, right? And honestly, it doesn't matter if it were true. But this reputation was really important. And that's sort of this backdrop to what's going on in this text, right? You have this celebrity actress, you have this Anne Bracegirdle, who is beloved, right, by her fans, by her audiences, but has very clearly set this reputation of being apart from them and not sexually available to them, right? And this is tied up sort of and thought about in interesting ways in how the anonymous author of this text takes up this incident, which remember really happened, and spins it into this text about the fandom sort of surrounding Bracegirdle. So I want to turn to that. Even at this early stage, at the beginnings of what we would consider modern celebrity in the 17th century, this attitude of a fan's entitlement to the female celebrity's body is very present, right, in this time, and as reflected sort of in this novel, in this text that is sort of about the fandom surrounding Bracegirdle in various ways. And the strongest instance of that in the novel that I really want to point to right now is, other than, of course, the actual physical violence and the abduction attempt, which is at the very end of the novel, and sort of barely is looked at, which I mean is interesting in the sense that readers probably really wanted that part, right? If we're thinking about this as a sort of scandal text, and this was a scandal, particularly because of the death of William Montfort, it's clear that this text was doing something else, right? Because it's not actually giving people that scandal. So what I'm sort of saying is that what it is doing is exploring what fandom has come to mean, right? In now that there are women on the English stage, which is something that had only sort of happened in the early 1660s for the first time on the English public stage, that is. And so this is a sort of a new sense of what it means to be a fan, what it means to be a female celebrity in England. And I really think this text is sort of exploring that in how it's presenting things and leaving the more details that people might have actually be expected to be more interested in to the side, right, in terms of how it's doing this text. So the thing that I find particularly interesting that I want to focus on for the rest of this video is thinking about how the secret history really connects celebrity and capitalism. Like it really connects this idea of a celebrity as something that is to be consumed by their fans in really sort of problematic and difficult ways. So keep in mind that this novel is from Montano's point of view, right? So even though it's not first person, it is a third person sort of perspective. The point of view is heavily focalized through Montano, and this is sort of the what we're getting in the text. And one of the things that the novel's really highlighting in this is this idea, this view that's sort of perpetrated by the male characters in the text that actresses are supposed to be publicly available to their audiences. Um, and this really comes out in a conversation between Montano and a couple of his male friends. And in this scene, there's the Count de la Lune, who actually represents a figure, Lord Morhan, who was the only person who was actually tried in relation to Montfort's death, so the death of the actor, and of course got off being a lord. But in this scene, this Count, he describes actresses as a group as women, so the entire group, right, whose reputation as well as person is exposed for the pleasure and diversion of the audience. And note that it's both the reputation and the person, or the body specifically here, that's being described as being for audiences. And that for me is doing a lot of ideological work in this passage, right? This idea of their whole presence, their whole being, their body, their selves, their personas, that celebrity is for their audiences. And in this way, it's actually quite gendered, right? In this is very much specifically the female celebrity and their male audiences. Um, and so this link, though, to sort of possession and public availability, and has an even sort of tighter link to capitalism in the way that Montano talks about his courtship. And I'm definitely put that in quotation marks. He's basically stalking Priscilla. Like, let's be clear about this um, throughout this novel. But his language of courtship is really heavily structured through economic language that draws on this idea of a sort of a transactional nature of what a celebrity might be thought to owe their fans. And thus he writes in the text in one of his letters to Priscilla that love is the tribute and revenue of beauty. And sort of another line is, I paid your beauty, my whole stock of love. And these are just sort of two examples, but like throughout the letter, there are these economic ideas of payments and transactions being used as a frame for his pursuit of Priscilla, his pursuit of the actress. So he uses words like receipt, debt, and indebted. And the clear implication is that his admiration of Priscilla is considered payment in some way, and thus he's owed her attention and ultimately her body, right? So this idea that this fan is owed something because their attention is payment in some way. And you can sort of, I'm sure you can hear how this still sort of is the way celebrity can be talked about right now, right? This idea that somehow because the fans give their attention, because they buy the products associated with a celebrity, they are somehow owed something more through those transactions. And so, although at this point in the novel, Montano hasn't literally attempted to buy Priscilla, as he says he will later, his relationship to the celebrity figure is already being couched in these transactional terms in problematic ways. I should note here that the figure for Bracegirdle in the story, so like the character Priscilla, actually pushes back against this entitlement in the very few scenes where we actually see her character. And it is only a couple of scenes. We only also see her in public, which is important. It's either in the playhouse or on the street. And in the few interactions that she actually has with Montano, she's actually quite scathing. Um, So, for example, like the first time he attempts to express his love, right? So, this sort of obsessive crush basically that he has on her, she calls him, well, she's saying that he's like, and I'm going to quote here from the text, some troublesome people at a feast will needs thrust the dish you esteem upon everyone, never considering that another may hate it. Nay, you lovers are still as impertinent as they, for neither of you will take any denial, which methinks is something troublesome as well as uncivil, right? So she's sort of pushing back against his sort of affection and honestly love in general at this point, because she doesn't know at this point that he's sort of in love with her. Um, she's pushing back against lovers in general. And when it actually does become clear that it's her that he's talking about loving, she sort of goes even further. She says, quote, "'Tis a pity you should fling it away, and 1,000 fine sayings to boot on me, since I vow, sir, I'm as deaf to that as the people to virtue in distress." And she's making quite a lovely joke there, actually, as well. This is one of the reasons why this is sort of a fandom text, because it has a number of points where your London theater fans would have gotten these jokes, because she often played innocent heroines in tragedy who end up being sort of the victims of sexual violence, often end up dying in various ways in these plays. And so that idea that people are, deaf to virtue in distress is a dig at her audiences in this. But even though she's pushing back against this in those couple of moments in the story where she appears, it is Montano's view that permeates the novel. And it's literally, as I mentioned, his point of view through which we're seeing those events. And so this is an interesting text in the sense that we're being shown this very sort of obsessive, stalkerish sort of character who is being quite normalized in very sort of problematic ways, right? Because he is the main character. So the last example I want to give is sort of centered on the character of Carmela, right? Who in herself, right, we're in sort of the idea of the market, the sex work market, where she's a bawd who promises to procure Bracegirdle for Montana, so Priscilla for Montano. And in her very function as a bawd, right, a seller of women, she's confirming to the men in their views that as an actress, right, like a sex worker, is always for sale if one knows how to approach the bargain. And this, of course, is a very problematic view of sex work in the sense that it takes away the agency, really, of the woman and implies that you just need the right bribe, which is sort of sustained throughout this text, this negative view. And so finally, when sort of the woman who Carmela enlists to personate Priscilla with Montano, right? So there's this bed trick. When Clelia, that woman, is acting the part, she has to remind herself to receive Montano with freedom, right? The better to act the mercenary part of such a one as she was to represent, right? So that's the exact line. And presumably this idea is she has to be sort of willing to pretend to be the actress with a fan who is willing to pay for, her sexual company. And that assumption is that public female celebrity is a public commodity, as long as one understands the correct price and the rules of the economic transaction. And that is very much sort of presented in this part of the text. So I do want to say that even though this story sort of seems to be presenting this idea of sort of actors as commodity in a very sort of normalized way, in a way that is very linked to the sort of early capitalism, because if you remember in Britain, this is sort of the origins. We're not quite in a capitalist society yet, but this is the origins of English capitalism. And so while this is sort of going on in the text in very sort of problematic and difficult ways, there are elements that push back against it, right? So because in one instance, because the novel itself never actually gives us Priscilla, never actually gives us Bracegirdle, but keeps that character to the margins actually of the story. And so a fan who bought this probably would have been horribly disappointed in that they were expecting sort of this behind the scenes idea of this event that happened that was quite sort of um, quite talked about right at the time. This is, the death of Montfort and this attempted abduction of Bracegirdle. Um, they don't get that really in the text. And so the secret history author itself, this anonymous author, is sort of, I think, in some ways, chiding the reader for expecting that. But the problem is that throughout the novel, the female celebrity is constantly treated as available to her fans for the right price, right? So they're not just objectified, they're reduced to a commodity to be used, exchanged, consumed. And the implication is that that is the life of a celebrity, that is the bargain made. And so the reasons I really wanted to sort of talk about this and bring this text sort of to more attention is that this just isn't a new phenomenon, right? This very idea is baked into our definitions of celebrity. And it's been a problem for as long as modern celebrity has existed, and honestly, likely before that. But that doesn't make it okay. And so I look back to the past, not to say that like this is inevitable, not to say that this is just the way it is and celebrities need to get over it, but rather to show the ideological formations that are underpinning our current discussions around celebrity and the ways that their roots are so firmly ingrained in capitalism and consumption. Because this shouldn't be inevitable, right? If we're talking about this in terms of structures, it really is not inevitable. It is not natural. We can do better. We can make different choices. So I want to push back on this idea, and I would sort of go to the past so we can imagine a better future for celebrity in some way. So that's it. I mean, thank you very much for watching. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. Um, if you want sort of more videos about 17th century celebrity culture, current pop culture, those sorts of things, like this video, subscribe to my channel. I will be doing sort of more updates slowly, absolutely, because in term time, I don't have a lot of time for this type of work, but I'm really enjoying it, and I hope that you do too. Thanks.